Embassy of India and BP Goyal India Nepal Foundation warmly welcomes you all to this 20th edition of Voices. Today we have with us eminent Indian author Namita Gokhale speaking on Across Borders, Literary Culture in South Asia. Can we have a huge round of applause for the eminent Indian author Namita Gokhale? Thank you so much. Namita Gokhale has written 6 novels, a collection of short stories, and several works of non-fiction all in English. To name a few, they are Paro, Dreams of Passion, God's Great and Grandmother, A Himalayan Love Story, The Book of Shadows, In Search of Sita, and Shakuntala. Namita Gokhale has written several books of non-fiction, including Mountain Echoes, which deals with a Kumaoni way of life through the eyes of 4 highly talented and individualistic women. The Book of Shiva is an introduction to Saivic philosophy and mythology. Gokhale's recent work, Priya, in Incredible India, resurrected some characters from her debut novel, Paro. A collection of short stories, The Habit of Love, was published in January 2012. Publishing is Namita Gokhale's another productive indulgence, the Namita Gokhale Editions, a signature imprint published in association with Roli Books, introduced some notable titles, including Rashna Imashli Gandhi's The Psychology of Love and Nilima Dalmia Adhar's biography on her father, R.K. Dalmia. She has conducted 2 memorable writers' retreats in London with Roli Books for the Namita Gokhale editions. She is one of the founder director of Yatra Books, which co-published with Penguin Books in Hindi, Marathi, Urdu, and other Indian languages, including in English in a groundbreaking series. She is the founder director of the Jaipur Literature Festival, along with author William Dalrymple, which started in 2006. She is also the festival advisor to Mountain Echoes, a literary festival in Bhutan, and the Kathmandu Literary Jatra, a first of its kind literature festival in Nepal, dedicated to promoting multilingual reading culture. She currently curates Kitab Nama, Books and Beyond, a weekly book show on Doordarshan. Namita Gokhale is also one of the most adored Indian authors in Nepal, who's visited Kathmandu for various literary works and festivals for over 15 times now. We're so happy to have you here, ma'am. This talk will go for like 40 minutes. She will also have a video presentation, after which we will open the floor for you to raise your questions or pass on the feedback or interact with her. Please stay with us. Now over to you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to...
Hello. I'm so happy there are so many people here, but there seem to be many gentlemen and very few ladies. And that I'm feeling bad because I try to reach out to women writers and women readers everywhere. It's a real honor to be invited here today. I've come here and spoken once before, some years ago. And this is a beautiful library. And why it is beautiful is because all the books look well read. Every book looks as though it has been borrowed, read, understood, returned. Even returned is a big thing because sometimes people don't return books to libraries. But it's a really beautiful library, and I cannot think of a better place to talk to people about books, reading and writing. So I'm here today to talk to all of you about the secret life of words and of the narratives and the stories that connect all of us. First of all, it's an extra joy to be here in Kathmandu with the unseen presences of the Himalayan peaks to bless us. I am a Kumaoni from just across the Kali River, from Nainital and Almora, and I feel a strong bond with the language, the music, the food, the culture of Nepal. The Himalayas are the youngest mountains in the world. They have a presence. They have an energy, they have an intuition about them. I've in the past had the privilege of being associated with the literary jatra that took place some years ago in 1911. Through that, I heard, read, met many Nepalese writers.
2011.
2011, that's what I said someone.
1990.
Oh, that is because I'm writing a book just now set in 1911. So, rewriter got distracted. I've had the opportunity through the Jaipur Literature Festival of meeting many Nepali authors over the years, from Manjushri Thapa and Suvani and Pranab Mansingh, Narayan Wagde, Ravi Thapa, Prashant Jha, Sujeev Chakya, Kanak Dixit, so many others who I met today, who are here with us today. And Ajit Baral also comes to the Jaipur Festival. And so I feel connected to this very intellectual atmosphere in Kathmandu, where people are not only thinking of making money and buying property, but they're also thinking of reading, writing, and the world of ideas. And of course, Nepali is one of the 24 Indian languages, just like Maithili is one of the Nepalese languages while being an Indian language. So my talk today is about these experiences of the crossover of languages and cultural borders. Because often we associate a language with a particular nation or with a nationalistic feeling or with a particular culture. But actually the larger South Asian culture, there are many, many crossovers from the where languages have travelled and words have travelled and stories have travelled. For example, well, we'll go to the examples later. But you know, it is a very unique privilege just now to be a writer in India. I'm a writer, I'm a publisher, I'm a festival director. And I don't, of course he introduced that I write in English, but although I write in English, I work in all the Indian languages, especially Hindi, and I publish in Hindi. And one of my books, the translation sometimes of my books in Hindi come out before the English. Because while I respect English, and English is also one of our Indian languages, I don't believe it's the only one. I don't even believe it's the first among equals. I feel English is just one more language, and it's a very convenient tool of communication, because even here today, across the many languages we share, it's English that's able to communicate with you. As I said, India is at the moment transforming from being I'm going to time this, otherwise I'll go on speaking and then I'll leave halfway. Okay. So India is transforming from being a very feudal, very hierarchical society, rather like Nepal was, into a knowledge society. And that's also because of technology, because in the new technology there are no Brahmins to control the knowledge. Of course there are new Brahmins, technology is the new Brahmin thing, but knowledge is now accessible to one and all. In that atmosphere, it's very important that different branches of knowledge, different languages, different literatures, different voices all get a good space. Now the word India itself goes back to the word Indies, which was in the plural, because everything about India is in the plural. And it's a country where literary traditions collide, but they coexist. And there's some connectivity. Now, so this diversity is very much on view in the Jaipur Literature Festival, which we began about 8 years ago, and to our surprise, it has become now the largest literature festival in the whole world, the largest free and unticketed festival. And more than 250,000 people come there in 5 days. Don't ask me how, because we don't know, but they come, they listen, they respond, and it's a great honor for India that this multilingual, democratic, unticketed, popular festival has increased the visibility of so far unaccessible writing. And also with this festival, another 70 festivals approximately have come out across South Asia. Now I'm going to request him to show a little film about the Jaipur Festival, which we made 2 years ago. It's a little bit out of date, but it gives you a sense of what this festival is about. But it's not the latest film. Please be good. Oh, we put it off so not too long. Sorry, you have to wait for a few minutes.
What are you ready?
Welcome to the 5th BSc Jaipur Literature Festival. Literature festivals like this one help us reflect on the changing nature of the words, of the histories they condense. The Sea of Stories, which is Indian literature, is renewed and revived every year. Every year, the world visits Jaipur and Jaipur visits the world. We have some of the greatest playwrights in the English language, Tom Stoppard and David Hare. Some of the greatest practitioners of the short story, Jamaica Kincaid and Annie Proulx. Some of the greatest poets, travel writers, military historians. We have a session on the history of the diversity of the festival program, I think, increases each year.
तुम्हारे शहर में कुछ रोज रहूं तो अपना गांव हिंदुस्तान मुझको याद आता है।
Actually, can you hear me? So I'm sorry because this was
the wrong film. This was the film I had wanted to bring you. Was a film which had little speeches by the different people who had spoken, and I was going to talk about this. It had Javed Akhtar, it had Mahashweta Devi, and I must have got the films mixed up when I packed them. But 2 years ago, Mahashweta Devi, who's one of our greatest Bangla writers and one of India's greatest writers, in her keynote address in the Jaipur Literature Festival, she said something which I can never forget. She said, the right to dream should be the fundamental human right. And this is really, I think, the truth, that the right to dream. And that is what books and reading gives us. Otherwise, there is no point in life without understanding life. And what people say about writers is that the writing life is the examined life. So here I want to go through very quickly the different cross-border literatures which we must understand if we have to understand the whole meaning of South Asian culture. So I'll begin, since we are speaking in English, I'll begin with the English literature. It is Salman Rushdie, actually, who in a way defined the modernism of modern Indian English writing. When he wrote Midnight's Children, it was a watershed which impacted how the world viewed South Asian writing. Not only did he get the Booker Prize, but he also then got the Booker of Bookers for Midnight's Children. And of course, it's a complete paradox, not unexpected, that he is not an Indian at all. He's a British born, partly Pakistani, from Mumbai and Karachi, and that's how the world is. Identities keep moving around, we are all many people. And although some critics categorized Midnight's Children as a valorization of this post-colonial, but in another way, Pico Iyer called it a call to free spirits everywhere, to remake the world with imagination. And really, this thing of dreaming, of imagination, Pico Iyer said, he opened up a new universe by changing the way we tell stories and see the world around us. But it was not really a new way, because Salim Sinai, Rushdie's main character, what he actually did was that he reclaimed the spoken sounds of Mumbai, Bombay streets into English literary usage. Just, there should not be a difference between what you hear on the street and what you hear in the books that you are reading. And this is what he could. Otherwise, everybody, all the Indian writers were trying to pretend they were also Angrezes and they could speak the Queen's English. But he brought the sounds of Bombay into his literature. And of course, it was also the fact that the Arabian Nights and the Katha Sarit Sagar and so many traditions of storytelling came through, because the tradition of storytelling is there in every culture. Just like Rushdie's writing also had the subtext of Urdu in it. In the same way, the other major writers like Jhumpa Lahiri, or like Amit Chaudhary, or like Neil Mukherjee, who was on the Booker list this year, who write in English, or Amitabh Ghosh. They write in English, but they have Bangla, almost as though they are writing in Bangla, but in English. Because languages in our imagination mix up. And today, I'm not going to talk about Indian writing in English. I'm going to talk about the languages that are across South Asia in different cultures. So I'm going to begin with Urdu. Now, Urdu is a language which is considered today an Islamic language. But actually, it is a modern and secular language that was founded some years ago, and because of the partition of India, it became the language of the Muslims. But actually, it was earlier a language called Hindustani, which combined Urdu and Hindi. And we had some great writers, Indian writers, like the greatest Indian writer, Munshi Premchand, or people like Rajendra Singh Bedi, Krishna Chandra, Kurutilan Haidar, Ismat Chugtai, Manto. All these people wrote in Hindustani, which had both these languages. And a very surprising fact, which I'm sure none of you are aware of, is, they say a language is a dialect with an army and a navy. And the economics of every situation makes a difference. Now, Hindi, Spanish, Mandarin Chinese, and English are the four dominant languages in the next 10, 15, 20 years. We don't know which will grow. Spanish is very much spoken around the world. English is equally much spoken. But maybe the most spoken language in the world is Hindustani. If you combine Urdu and Hindi, because they have the same vocabulary but different texts, more people speak it than any other language, be it in Pakistan, be it in Afghanistan, be it in America, Canada, and the UK. So languages keep changing. And when Urdu became part of a very repressive society in Pakistan, then languages, as they said, they have a secret world. So it became the language of satire and of revolution. And you have poets like Faiz Ahmad Faiz, who was their greatest national poet. And in that atmosphere of a military dictatorship, he wrote some of the greatest poetry ever on freedom. So that is the beauty of Urdu. And we must remember that Urdu has also had not only Urdu language, Urdu culture has had a Nepal connect. Because when the court of Awadh took refuge here, I'm not good in history, but at that time, Then the Kathak traditions came to Nepal, and I have in the past heard many beautiful Nepali ghazals. And the ghazal has become a part of the Nepali poetic tradition, as I am aware. Right now, Urdu is spoken around the world. It's spoken in Canada quite a lot. It's spoken in Bollywood, and it is spoken in Punjab. So that's how languages travel. They begin somewhere. It began like a language of the army camps, a hybrid language, and then it moved on. And now I want to discuss another national language of Pakistan, which is Sindhi. And Sindhi is a great literary tradition. From the 15th century, they had these heroic ballads, including the Shah Abdul Latif. But Sindhi has suffered because of politics and geography. Because after the partition, can you hear me? It's clear? After the partition of India and Pakistan, a lot of the Sindhi speakers in India, the Hindus, they had no land to go back to. And the Sindhi speakers there also had lost something. So in the Jaipur festival, I'm always trying to get Sindhi speakers from Pakistan and from India to connect, because some great literature is being written still in it across the border, in spite of the sometimes bitter enmity of the two countries. And there are even dialects of Sindhi like Saraiki and Multani, which are doing really beautifully in literary terms. Then let's look at Bhutan. Bhutan is across the border, and I helped to curate a festival there also. And there also you have many languages which are getting lost. Towards the east of Bhutan, a lot of the languages are common with the Northeast Indian languages. Dzongkha is a new language, and there's this clash between a government language like Dzongkha and English, which is a language of Facebook, of blogs, and of new writing. They are trying to strike a balance. Then Nepali also has a very strong presence in Bhutan, because across the Himalayan countries, whether it is in Assam or even in the northeast, Nagamis is a mixture of Assamese, Nepali, and all these languages, which is so. Nepali is one of the dominant languages across the whole Himalayan belt and all the Himalayan countries. But it changes everywhere. It adjusts its ears, its dialect according to the other languages reacting with. You know, the Jugalbandi with the local language impacts the accent and how it is spoken. Of course there are the Buddhist links and so many others. Let's look at Sri Lanka. Now Sri Lanka has a completely different template, because Sri Lanka has one language in common with India, which is Tamil. And Tamil is one of the oldest languages in India, and it has a huge tradition of classical literature, which is the Sangam literature, and it has a big, absolutely angry, one is this classical language of Sangam literature. Below that there's another language of revolution, of young people, of Dalit writers, of people who are questioning, transgressing, who are using dialects. So there are two Tamil literatures, and then there's a third Tamil literature, which is the Elam literature of the Tamil diaspora, because after the Sri Lankan Civil War, a lot of the Tamil writers and poets are still remembering and mourning their, what could be called a genocide or what could be called a very bitter civil war. And they are writing this poetry from Paris, from Canada, from across the world. So this way that languages travel, is fascinating to me. Then they have the Sinhala writers like Michael Ondaatje, Ramesh Gunasekara, Naomi Munavira. And it's very interesting that the English writers are usually settled in London or something, live very comfortable lives, and remember the Sri Lanka they want to remember. But they are often out of touch with the modern country. And I personally am not fond of this. I mean, I respect it as good writing, but I think all these Chinese writers who don't like China from the comfort of the nearest Chinese restaurant in London, or all these international global refugees who use English, they are wonderful writers, but they are not in touch with the living language. This is not a criticism, but it's an observation. So you have great writers like Michael Ondaatje, Ramesh, but you have great writing happening in Sri Lanka also. Shehan Karunatilake wrote a book called Chinaman, and this is a book about cricket. And cricket, of course, is the default language of the whole of South Asia. And I'm told it's catching on in Nepal also now, over football. But all these Pali has a big Sanskrit tradition. So Pali, Sinhala, Tamil literature, they've got their own conflicts. They don't speak to each other much. And you keep finding writers who have one parent is Tamil, one parent is Sinhala, and they are carrying the pain because they haven't reconciled in their literatures or in their internal cultural things. Now let's come to Bangladesh, the other side. And this is an absolutely fascinating story because India and Bangladesh and their diaspora around the world, they are both in love with the Bangla language because it is both sweet and radical. And we have to remember that Bangla is the sixth most spoken language in the world, and there are more Bangla speakers in the world than there are French speakers. But because we are so Anglophone, we think French is a great language. French is a great language. But Bangla literature has a place on the map. And the imprint of Bangla literature actually came from Tagore and Satyajit Ray. And you know, all these religious divides, Islam, Hinduism, nothing can divide the Bangla imagination because Tagore is there over them, Sunil Gangopadhyay is there, and there are great writers in Bangla like Syed Shamsul Haq, Shamsul Rahman, Humayun Ahmad. I've met many of these, and then you have many English writers in Bangla. So it's fascinating to see again how the Bangla thing is. I'm just, you know, this year I've spoken in a literature festival in Lahore, and I've been invited to 4 literature festivals in Lahore. And of course, I forgot to mention the most vibrant common language between India and Pakistan, more than Urdu, more than Sindhi, is Punjabi. And Punjabi is one of the most beautiful, the language of Bulle Shah, the language, very mystic language. And this time in Lahore, there was so much celebration of Punjabi across the border. Then, you know, a new literary community, because of these literature festivals, is happening across Asia. Because I'm going just now to the Dhaka festival after this. So across India, across Pakistan, across Bangladesh, across Sri Lanka, it has very little to do with politics. It has, or even the politics of culture, because culture has its own politics. It has to do with pure literary and linguistic communication. Now let's discuss India. India has 22 official national languages, 122 regional languages, 4 classical languages, and I always forget which are the 4, but there's Sanskrit, there's Kannada, there's Tamil, and there's one more. Telugu. And it has 1726 mother tongues, thousands of dialects. It's an amazing country. They say every 25 kilometers, the pani badalta hai, bhasha badalti hai. And although the colonization, the imposition of English, it for a while suppressed the Indian languages, but they also gained from it. And now there's a new flowering, I feel. And you know, there are these distinct traditions, Hindi, Bangla, Tamil, Malayalam. Malayalam, I forgot to tell you, is another international language because it is the second language in most of Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. Malayalam is spoken, read very widely. Now you have a Malayalam diaspora novels, like Benjamin has written Goat Days in Malayalam, but it's an international book across borders. So, and Malayalam is also spoken along with Tamil in Singapore. So regional languages is so unexpected. And then you have the Northeast languages, where English is the first tongue. But even though these people speak in English, it's because there was such a huge variety of languages across Nagaland, I think 18 dialects if I'm not mistaken. And then you have Khasi, you have Mizo, all these languages. And often the script, they didn't have a script, they were oral languages. And the missionaries who came from the UK, and especially the Welsh missionaries, they often gave them a script, sometimes a Roman script. Let's move to mythology. And the late Yuvadanand Murthy once said that there are 2 languages which are understood all over India. These languages are the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Because if you refer to any character from the Ramayana and Mahabharata, they can be understood. If you call somebody a Ravana, if you call somebody a Kekari, or if you call somebody, people understand, or Sita. So you don't need the languages. and actually this was the first huge translation enterprise in India, which happened spontaneously, because we have the classical tradition and the folk tradition, and there are classical Ramayanas, classic Mahabharats translated, but there are also folk Mahabharats, folk Ramayanas, which are used in Pandavani or in oral traditions or in the whole Ramayana traditions around the Shaila. So the Ramayana and the Mahabharata has provided some of the material. Not only has it provided it in the past, but what is really interesting, and I don't know whether this is happening in Nepal just now, but in India, writing about mythology has become really popular. And our best-selling books are either about cricket or about mythology. Because recently Sachin Tendulkar's book, which cricket you can say is also a type of mythology, along with Bollywood. But just now Sachin Tendulkar's book has sold, I don't know, more than any other book in 1 week. But mythology, you have writers like Amish Tripathi who write about the Shiva trilogy. I have written a book on Sita, questioning the whole rationale of the Banvas, which was, from that 7 more books on Sita came out. Then people like Narendra Kohli write in Hindi, Anand Neelakantan writes in English. I mean, there are so many books, I won't even list them out. But Indians are returning in English to understand their mythology. And the reason for this is because in other countries, mythology is a dead and a static subject. But in India and in the whole of South Asia, we constantly reinterpret our mythology. And the reason we reinterpret our mythology is because it's a living barometer of how we look at our morals, our ethics, our life, equity. So every story is told for its own times. And it's enacted, and there are little modern touches that come in, Then, to look at the marginalized literatures of India, there are many societies which are called illiterate. And this has always offended me because there is no such thing as an illiterate society. They use other forms of literature. It's much easier to write a book than to remember so much. These are societies that have transmitted their cultures for thousands of years through memory. There's a man called Ghafaruddin Mewati, who is a very dear friend of mine, and he is continuing the tradition in Alwar of the 18th century when the Muslim composer Sadullah Khan, he took the Mahabharata because the whole Gyatwas episodes were around Sariska, and he told it as 22 days of poetry. And now it is a secular poem told by the Muslim community. They recite it for 22 days. But this man is old. When he dies, there is nobody to remember. So the oral traditions across South Asia are the most urgently needing love, attention and respect is what I feel. Otherwise you cannot transmit them. You read about them in some library. Then there are the Dalit voices, which are extremely important because this is the real transformational literature of India. And it's only through the Jaipur Festival that I really came to know and respect and understand Dalit literature. It was when I first read and met a gentleman called Om Prakash Valmiki, whose Juthan is one of the most beautiful books in Hindi and in English. And when he came to the Jaipur Festival, and it moved people to tears, Then there are people like Kancha Ilaya, who is the ideologue of the Dalit movement, and he wrote, I'm going to quote here, he wrote an article in the Deccan Herald where he said, literary festivals teach how to connect oneself to social mass culture if one is doing transformative writing. If it helps even a section of the oppressors to identify with the point of view of the oppressed, writing becomes more meaningful. That's why in all the festivals, all the events I do, I don't take any political position myself. But I try to be neutral. But I try to make as many political points of view or apolitical points of view. Because everything is political and nothing is political. To talk. Because only when there is dialogue, if everybody speaks to the people who are already convinced, where is the transformation of literature? Then there are the women writers. Now, this is a very unfortunate, it does not show up India in a very good light, sadly. But, there's a lot of patriarchal and very male-dominated feelings. I can see now 2 ladies in the audience, so I can say this confidently, that the male writing establishment in Hindi in India, they look at women as though they are some other species. And some years ago, the Vice Chancellor of the Mahatma Gandhi International Hindu University, a gentleman called Vibhuti Narayan Rai, he began a real controversy because he said Indian women writers are chinars or prostitutes. Then he had to resign in the end. He said they write about the physical rather than the spiritual. And I have my own take on this. Though then a lot of people defended women writers, but you know, a lot of people think when a woman writer writes about her sexuality or about her body, they misunderstand. It's not about sexuality at all. It's about reclaiming your body, because we live in a culture where a woman writer, if her body and her mind belong to her father, her husband, her sons, where does she enter society? She has to write about her body before her mind is her own again. So, and then there are writers like Revati, The Truth About Me, A Hijra Life, where people write about transgender identities. So, you know, writing an identity and writing and asserting your identity are very important. Now, I'll close now because I think we are closing, we are running short of time, I think, or a little more. Okay, so South Asian literature, in its many voices, many languages, many avatars, its cultural connectivity and the Vedas, it's always been a Bahubhashit literature. And the Vedas, which are the earliest remembered expression of our literary culture, record a moving prayer, which I can't quote it to you because somebody read it to me once and he never read it to me again, which urges invoking the gods in many languages. So, South Asia, all of us are bilingual, sometimes trilingual, it comes naturally, unlike many Western societies. They say you have as many lives as you have languages. And the more languages we know, I'm not very good at languages, the more empathy we have. I write in Hindi, but some of my books have been translated. Shakuntala was translated into, I write in English, but the Hindi edition came out first. And I think the Hindi edition captured it more. Now, this was the atmosphere in which we began the Jaipur Literature Festival, where English was still the ruling language. Everybody said, oh, he's from London, he's been published here, this and that, he's been reviewed in the New York Times. These things don't matter to me. What matters is we have to look in our own mirror, we have to make our own judgments. And I think this is happening, that South Asia in the literary space is beginning to look at its own reflection rather than viewing itself with the refracted approval of an imagined Western audience. I think this is the most significant thing that is happening. The other significant thing that is happening is languages is flattening out. In 2 years ago in the Jaipur Festival, one young girl, Aditi Maheshwari of Vani Prakashan, she made a statement I can never forget. And I'm sure it's true of Nepali in some other way. She said, Hindi writers dream in Hindi but aspire in English. And you know, this is what is happening because all the good things in life come with English. But your emotions and emotional identity are to do with Hindi, Nepali, with your mother tongue. And the most dangerous language in the world is a language called Globish. Globish is an international language with a vocabulary of 1500 words. And many young people are forgetting their mother tongues, only know Globish, yes, no, thank you sir. And they are forgetting the words for trees, for clouds, for mountains. With that you lose a scientific vocabulary. So if there's both a tool, Globish is a great tool, but it's a very bad master. And it will be a sad country where Globish is happening in Japan, it's happening in France, that this little SMS vocabulary, I, L, U, V, U, all these things. You know, language is changing, technology is changing, but we have to love and nurture our languages if we want to keep the completion of our identity. Also then I want to mention the Bhakti poets very quickly, because from the 12th century till the late 18th century, the Bhakti movement is what united India across languages, across sexes. Women writers were there, Sufi writers were there, Muslim writers were there, Hindu writers were there. And the Guru Granth Sahib, the Sikh holy book, was perhaps the first anthology of Bhakti poetry translated into Punjabi. And I'm quoting here, the Bhakti or Sufi poets who illumined the literature of medieval South Asia, from Kabir and Mirabai to Rumi and Shams Tabrizi. These poet saints had searched for social justice and the dignity of the individual, and the high art of Sanskrit classicism had yielded to the voices of common people, of weavers and washermen, thieves and prostitutes, confronting their times and establishing a direct connection with their personal divinity, doing away with the classical, which also has its place in literature. Now, English is also, like Sanskrit, the high language. And these languages, these classical languages have a great function. English is also a link language where we connect translations from across India. It's through English that we know the difference between a Marathi poem and a Kannada poem. And a writer from Tamil can come into... So this function of translation, like democracy, translation must seek equity. There should be no dominant bias between two languages. The cultural cues and subtext. Otherwise, if you think, oh, I'm getting translated into English, if you give away the particularity of your language there, the reader in English also has to, you have to make demands in translation of the reader. They have to carry a cultural journey also. I'm going to now, otherwise there's a distortion in the translation process and there's a distortion in understanding what is world literature. Because I strongly feel that the Anglophone languages, they really think still that they control the world. 2 years ago, the Man Booker International Prize came to Jaipur and they asked me to do a session. The theme was, is there a world literature? So I had a big fight with them. I said, of course there's a world literature. But you don't understand it, you don't recognize it, because you only understand what you see in English. So I respect all languages, but unless we value translations across the border, we are always seeing a little part of the picture. We are only opening one window when we could open doors and slide doors and read the real literature of the world. Now I'm going to end by quoting a great Indian writer and poet called A.K. Ramanujan. He wrote, because he was multilingual between Tamil, Kannada and all that, so he wrote, by a curious perversity, I read Tamil in the Kannada area, Kannada in the Tamil area, studied and taught English in India and Indian languages in the US. And in his fictional autobiography, the protagonist, who's an Indian with an American wife, teaching history in an Iowa college, recollects his childhood. He says, in my early days, I spoke Madras Tamil to Amma. I switched to Mysore Tamil with our Iyengar housemates who cooked for us. Outside the house, I spoke Kannada with friends. And upstairs in the office, Abba conversed in English. And then upstairs in the temple, everybody spoke to God in Sanskrit. So these upstairs, downstairs, inside out, I got accustomed to many languages. I suspect it happens, as I've been explaining to you, that across the borders of South Asia, we pick up so many languages, so many inflections, so many nuances. This is a great local, regional blessing that we have so many nuanced words, cultures, which are resilient, and with social media, television channels, passive vocabularies, they are growing. So, while Indians and South Asians live in many languages, they are rarely self-conscious of this plurality. So I want to conclude this slightly rambling talk with a tribute to the curious perversity of our complex literary culture, which is upstairs, downstairs, inside, outside, different languages, and of course the great new language, English, which is flowering across India, which is, I don't mind English, I don't like Globish, but English can be a very great language, like Jab We Met, that great movie. Now, it's a unique privilege to be in the eye of the storm of this great literary re-exploration of some of the most ancient continuous cultures in the world that we have across South Asia. There are, as I said, 70 literature festivals and counting. Something is happening to the literary world in South Asia. The love of books, the love of ideas, the vitality and passion to write in the unique texture and contours of the subcontinent. These things are illuminating today's literary life, regionally and internationally. And it is really an extraordinary time to be writing, to be reading, and I hope we can hand on the joys of reading and writing and thinking to our next generations. And on that note, please a big clap for reading and writing, ideas and dialogue, books and thoughts. Thank you. I guess we could take questions and comments. I can see some great writers in the last row have arrived just now.
If you would like to share a few words, Narayan, I see you there.
Thank you very much, Namita. Nice to see you here.
Yes.
I didn't have anything. Sorry to miss you most of the part.
But do share the same theme if you can. Continue the conversation.
I didn't have anything to add on what you said. I just had one question. You run literary festival as well. That was great. You might be following very keenly the South Asian languages, the progress, development outside English as well. So which language in particular progressing in literary excellence sense? So which languages or language is or are progressing much on that front outside English?
Thank you, Nara. It's a very interesting question. And first, let me tell you which languages are languishing. The languages which are languishing are the Himalayan languages sometimes. And that's because last year at the Jaipur Festival, we had a special session. We had Manjushri Thapa also there. We had my dear friend Shekhar Pathak, who's working with Ganesh Devi, and Prasoon Joshi as a popular Pahari writer. And because the Himalayan languages are so isolated, they are the languages of small communities, pastoral communities. Such languages which don't have access to media, they sometimes shrink, but this happens. And the Andamanese language, the last speaker of the great Andamanese language died 2 years ago. So these are the languages which are shrinking. I feel the language which dominated Indian literature for almost 150 years was Bangla. And still, you go to any literature festival, you go to any reading, it's the Bangla writers who are writing in English and Bangla, who are the most intensely informed and they care about writing and reading. But the person who is moving ahead in excellence and in radical ideas and in technology is the Malayalam writers. Last year I found on their own 8 Malayalam writers had come to the festival. Not that we had said we'll have a Malayalam section, but somebody was excellent. Shashi Tharoor was excellent for something, M.T. Vasudevan Nair was excellent for something, Benjamin, K.R. Meera. So I feel for some reason, just you cannot say why some language is doing well. I think Malayalam has a huge reading culture. And they don't read only they read in Malayalam and they read with pride. When you have Hindi writers, you talk to a Hindi speaking couple, you say, do you read books in Hindi? And the man will say, no, my missus reads in Hindi. They feel ashamed of their own language. But in Malayalam, they are proud of their language. And great cinema is happening. So if great cinema happens along with great writing, it feeds each other. Awards are happening, bookshops are happening, publishing is happening. And you have the Sharjah Literature Festival, which was almost a dead festival till they brought in the Tamil, the Malayalam people. And then I went there 2 years ago. In the Sharjah Festival, people are going with shopping carts, buying up books like there is no tomorrow. So my answer is Malayalam followed by Bangla, though Bangla used to be leading earlier. Thank you.
Any more questions?
My name is Urmila Palta. आपके इसमें मैं बहुत देर से पहुंची हूँ, फिर भी मैंने आपके 2-4 शब्द सुनने के बाद ऐसा लगा कि आपने कहा था पानी बदलता है, भाषा बदलती है। उसमें मैंने एक मुक्तक लिखा, पानी बदलता है, भाषा बदलती है, साहित्य धार में बहकर परिभाषा बदलती है। क्या ऐसा हो सकता है?
बिल्कुल, साहित्य धार में बहुत आपने सुंदर कहा और परिभाषा बदलती है, मगर ये भी याद रखना है कि आजकल पानी बदलता नहीं है क्योंकि पानी मल्टीनेशनल लोगों का हो गया है। तो ये नहीं होता है कि हम कोई अपने कोई कुएं से पानी निकाल रहे हैं, कोई नदियों का पानी कोई पी नहीं सकता है, वो एकदम गंदा हो गया है, नीचे जल तो है वो मिलता ही नहीं गंदा होता है, अस्वच्छ होता है, झूठा होता है। और जैसे कि साहित्य के साथ भी ऐसा ही हो, पानी के साथ जो हो रहा है, बस मैं ये भगवान से प्रेयर करती हूँ कि साहित्य के साथ ऐसा नहीं हो कि पानी अब नहीं बदलता है।
मैंने आपके हिसाब से चिपका लिखा था ये
बहुत अच्छा लगा।
थैंक यू।
Any more questions?
Hello, namaste. I am Prasanth, and I am very proud of Nepali language and Hindi language. Most of the people, those who are living adjacent to the border, they speak Hindi language and understand also. Those who also don't know Hindi language, they understand, understand Hindi movies. They go often Hindi cinema. But in Hindi cinema, I am looking that most of the films are using their words, especially English words. They are using English words. What is your comment on this? Because in the globalizing process, India is moving towards the emerging power. At the same time, language is the power. So somehow we are promoting Hindi, English language also. Do you feel so? So what is your comment?
It's a very intelligent question, and there are 3 or 4 points, and I hope I remember all of them. The first is that, Hindi cinema has been a great friend of literature in the past. Whether it is Sahib Ludhianvi, whether it is Gulzar Saab, whether it is Javed Akhtar, whether it is Prasun Joshi, Kamal, people who write poetry, their poems become songs. So people, they learn to appreciate poetry and music together. That's why from the P60s, 1960s, the golden age, everybody in India, they remember those songs, they remember them for their poetry also. So that is it. The second thing is the mixing up of Hindi, English and every language, that khichdi Bollywood language. It's what unites India. Because otherwise India, half the people don't know Hindi, half the people don't know English, half the people, people don't know each other's languages. But just like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, they also all know Bollywood. And in Bollywood there's no Muslim, there's no Hindi, there is just... And Ramchandra Guha once wrote a book on India, I can't forget which one, where he called it the most important state of India is the state of Bollywood. Because it has got its own life. But something very, very dangerous is happening in Bollywood, where the link of Bollywood with the real life of people. Because see, Bombay was this dream city where from every part of India, whether it is from Assam, whether it is Hazarika, whoever it is, from every part of country, A.R. Rahman doesn't know any Hindi, but he will sing in Hindi. So this language of Bollywood is the heart and soul of India. Lots of people make fun of Bollywood. I started a film magazine called Super at a time when the word Bollywood was not there. And people said, you studied literature, why are you looking at popular cinema? But I believe in India cinema, though I don't watch it anymore. But the very dangerous thing that is happening is that nowadays, script writers write in English. They write in English, then they give it to some khachar to translate it into Hindi. So the thinking is in English. So I remember seeing a film and one girl comes and says, "ये मेरे बारे में नहीं है, नहीं ये तुम्हारे बारे में नहीं है." Now it was your English. This is not about you. This is about me. Now I have no problem. Everything is allowed. But if you are thinking in English and trying to create some content for the popular Hindi world, it doesn't work. It becomes not sincere. So I'm not happy with this trend. But then you have writers like Anurag Kashyap, you have a new wave of writers, Sudhir Mishra, who are more rooted in their cultures. And they make popular films. So because the marketplace and the success of commercial cinema is something to respect. But when it becomes just a machine, where a lot of rich kids whose parents were rich, there's a new, just like everything in India is a dynasty. When there's dynastic rule in the Bollywood also, it's the fresh people come from across India who give it the real idea. So I agree with you that the danger of all these scripts being written in English, translated into Hindi, somewhere the authenticity will go. Thank you for that.
I am highly influenced by your deliberation. I have to point your you have coined a term, right to dream.
The right to dream.
So
I have not coined it. It is Mahashweta Devi who is my guru ki guru who has coined it. But it should be even in Nepal. In fact, we should start a movement, the right to dream. And it's a right which nobody can take away from you.
writers are mad dreamers, right? I congratulate you.
But you have to remember, writers are dreamers, but there are lots of nightmares around us. And when there are nightmares, it's the job of the writer to confront the nightmare and to say, you're nothing but a nightmare. We'll wake up to a new dawn. I'm sorry if that got too poetic. I don't like poetic talk. But life is not only about beautiful dreams. Life is about things going wrong. And at those times, it's the job of the writer to assert what they believe in.
You are also focused on oral tradition. It is very nice idea. We should remember.
Well, I hope that it's very easy in Nepal or wherever radio can be used and now or video. I would urge even the Indian Embassy or Bharat Library to try and do a documentation along with Nepali people of oral literature. Go to village with a camera and a recorder. Record the oldest lady telling her grandmother stories. Record the people who do rituals. Because we are in a age where so much is changing and young people sometimes don't realize the value. It's as though you were painting your house and you say, oh, this, throw it away. And they don't realize they're throwing away some of the most valuable inheritances which can never come back. China lost everything during the Cultural Revolution. One of the most great and continuous cultural, the Chinese culture has been contiguous with a South Asian culture. What a great culture! And that little break of so many years cost them so dear. Now they have to reconstruct. So always record, archive, transmit. More important than our own writing sometimes.
Folklore is not the study of fossils.
I completely agree. Folklore is the collective, folklore and myth is the collective imagination and the collective dharohar of our culture. So since you and I agree with each other on everything, this is not a question.
Any more questions? I see a hand there.
Hello, my name is Vijay and I would like to ask you one question. Like you also mentioned that there are some languages which are spoken across India and Nepal, like Maithili and Bhojpuri, and in some part Awadhi also. So how do you see they are going to play, in what way they are going to play the role in future relationship between the
Indian traditions between Nepal and India. I found whenever you try to do something officially, it always fails. You try to say Awadhi friendship, Bhojpuri friendship, Maithili friendship, some people will come, make some official trips, there's no heart in it. I was just discussing with Mr. Abhay how there's this festival we do in Patna. And there was a session I was really impressed by where they talked about Maithili is the official language in Bihar. Bhojpuri is not one of the 22 Indian languages. Rajasthani is not one of those languages. Because sometimes politics comes into it. Since it became an official language, Maithili suffered. Because it came into the bureaucrats' hands. Never give a language away to bureaucrats. Let them have one. But Bhojpuri became so strong because cameras became cheaper. There was a huge... ये दो बातों का मैं रिस्पांस दे दूं, नहीं तो मैं तीन बातों का रिस्पांस दे नहीं पाऊंगी।
सबके साथ एक ही बात बोल के मैं खत्म कर दूं। उसके बाद आपने से गुलीजन के साथ सुनना तो मेरा सौभाग्य है, तो हम जरूर सुनेंगे हम। उसके बाद तीसरा नंबर बात, जैसा कि आपने कहा, महाश्वेता देवी ने कहा कि everyone has to right to dream। महाश्वेता देवी ने जितना ड्रीम के बारे में लिखा है उतना ही उन्होंने जीवन के यथार्थ को भी भोगा हुआ है, क्योंकि आदिवासी के साथ काम करने का उनका लंबा एक्सपीरियंस है उनका। और चौथा नंबर बात, जैसे कि आपने विभूति नारायण जी के बारे में कहा, तो यहाँ सबसे बैठे हुए मेरा लोगों से आग्रह है कि वास्तव में महिलाओं के लेखन को लोग एक हल्के फुल्के अंदाज में लिया करते हैं या उनके लेखन को दिल से ऊपर उठ के नहीं सोचा करते हैं। तो ऐसे लोगों के बीच में मेरा यही कहना है कि उन लोग कृपा करके उन लोग प्रतिभा राय को पढ़ें, यही किताब मिल जाएगी, यही किताब है उनकी सारी किताबें पढ़ेगी, या सुभद्रा कुमारी चौहान को पढ़ें या नई लेखिकाओं को पढ़ें, तो उसके बाद उनको पता चल जाएगा कि हमारा भी मेंटल स्टेटस जो है तो पुरुषों के ही जैसा है। बस इतना ही मेरा कहना है। हाँ, और एक और बात, सबसे बड़ी बात तो ये है कि आप जैसे बड़े राइटरों से हम ये भी हम लोग जानना चाहेंगे कि कोई भी राइटर लिखता क्यों।
अब ये तो आपने इंटरव्यू कर दिया, फिर 5 बातें और एक छोटा भुलक्कड़ नारायण मेमोरी और इतने मान। तो पहली बात जो आपने कही, मैं सलमान रुश्दी को इतना बड़ा देखा, अगर आप खड़ी रहे तो आप मुझे याद दिला दीजिएगा मैं क्या बोल रही हूँ, और ये लास्ट क्वेश्चन होगा, फिर लास्ट 5 क्वेश्चन। तो सलमान रुश्दी का मेरा ये नहीं कहना है कि वो इतने बड़े लेखक हैं, इनफैक्ट उसके बाद उनकी और किताबें उस स्तर पर नहीं पहुंची, पर वो जो एक किताब उन्होंने लिखी, उन्होंने भाषा में एक परिवर्तन लाए, और अंग्रेजी भाषा में, अंग्रेजी के ही गढ़ में मुल्कराज आनंद सिंपली लिखते थे, आर.के. नारायण सिंपली लिखते थे, पर उन्होंने अंग्रेजी को बदला नहीं, अपनाया नहीं, इन्होंने वो एक अग्रेशन किया, और असली में इसलिए मैं उनका नाम ले रही थी। और उससे पहले एक बहुत बड़े लेखक होते थे वी देसानी, उन्होंने, उसको लोग भूल चुके हैं, उन्होंने किताब लिखी थी ऑल अबाउट एच हैटर, और जो किताब जिस भाषा में सलमान रुश्दी ने अंग्रेजी को अपना के उसमें हिंदी के व्याकरण, हिंदी का ग्रामर, हिंदी का नहीं, मुंबईया भाषा का ले आए, केंचो, इस मतलब वो पूरा उन्होंने मेटाफर बदल दिया, इडियम बदल दिया अंग्रेजी का। इसी तरह से वी देसानी ने किया था, पर वो इतने पॉपुलर कभी नहीं हुए थे। वी देसानी की किताब मुझे याद है ऑल अबाउट एज हैटर, और उसमें एक फ्रेज हर समय आता था, ऑल इज ट्यूसडे। अब आप ही बताइए ऑल इज ट्यूसडे क्या होना चाहिए? सब मंगल है। तो ये जरा ऑडेसिटी, भाषा को अपनाने की, लेने की भाई वो बोले उसकी भाषा है, इसको मैं विश्वास रखती हूँ। दूसरी बात है जो आपने, दूसरी बात क्या थी आपकी? हाँ, तो दलित लेखन में मैं आपके साथ कंप्लीटली इन एग्रीमेंट हूँ कि ये जो सवर्ण, मतलब देखिए मैं खुद एक ब्राह्मण फैमिली में पली, और थ्रूआउट माय चाइल्डहुड एक तरह की ब्राह्मण प्राइड बहुत ज्यादा होती है पहाड़ी ब्राह्मण में। उनके पास पैसे तो होते नहीं है, एक पेड़ होता है, नींबू का पेड़ होता है, और अपने जरा लर्निंग होती है, जरा हमारी नाक है, इस तरह का प्राइड होती है, क्यों नहीं हो। मगर जब मैं दलित पोजीशन कब समझी, मैंने किताब एडिट की इन सर्च ऑफ सीता, क्योंकि मुझे लगा इसमें बड़ा अन्याय है कि हमारी जनकपुर की सीता जो है, कोई भी प्रेग्नेंट औरत को 9th month ऑफ प्रेगनेंसी में तुम जंगल में छोड़ा और तुम कहो ये एक राजा का न्याय है। उस देश में कभी जेंडर इक्विटी हो ही नहीं सकती जहां इस बात को क्वेश्चन नहीं किया जाए। हर हिंदुस्तानी औरत या हर एशियन औरत के सामने एक अग्नि परीक्षा और एक लक्ष्मण रेखा खड़ी है हर समय। तो जब मैंने ये किताब लिखी और इस पे रिसर्च किया और एंथोलॉजी बनाई, तब मैंने देखा कि जो औरत की पोजीशन है एक ग्रामीण या जो हिंदू पेट्रियार्की में एक जो औरत की पोजीशन है वो, और जो दलित की पोजीशन है वो, मतलब दे आर नॉट इक्वल, पर एक ही नजरिया से मतलब कुछ वहां से सिमिलैरिटीज हैं। फिर इतने सालों जब इतने बड़े बड़े दलित लेखक जयपुर आए, उनसे मेरा मिलना जुलना हुआ, मैं थोड़ा समझ पाई कि यहाँ क्या हो रहा है ट्रांसफॉर्मेशनल राइटिंग में। पर उसमें अगर खाली एंगर हो या फ्रस्ट्रेशन हो या सोशल असर्शन हो, ये बात नहीं है। क्योंकि जैसे अजय नवारिया एक राइटर हैं, वो हिंदी में लिखते हैं, वो दलित राइटर्स के बीच में बहुत अनपॉपुलर हैं, क्योंकि वो बहुत अच्छा लिखते हैं, पर वो खाली इन्हीं विषय पर नहीं लिखते हैं, वो उनकी आइडेंटिटी उससे अगले जनरेशन में चली गई है। तो इसमें जो नुआंसेस होती हैं, इनमें हम देखते हैं अच्छा लिख कौन रहा है। और ये जो आप कह रही हैं इसका अंग्रेजी में एक शब्द है अप्रोप्रिएशन ऑफ वॉइस। तो ये जितने एकेडमिक्स होते हैं, जितने बड़े लोग होते हैं, उनको बड़ा अच्छा लगता है अप्रोप्रिएशन ऑफ वॉइस कि चलो आजकल ये फैशनेबल है तो मैं भी इसको भी ले लूँ। मैं किसी को मतलब ये भी हक है सबका दुनिया में जो जाओ अप्रोप्रिएट कर ले, मगर जो असली राइटिंग होती है वो उसमें एक ऑथेंटिसिटी होना, अगर ऑथेंटिसिटी नहीं हो तो ह्यूमिलिटी हो। अगर आप समझ गई मैं क्या कह रही हूँ, और बाकी भी आपकी सब बातें मैं बहुत सहमत हूँ इन सब से, और बड़ा अच्छा हुआ कि ऑडियंस से भी इतने मतलब आपने मुझे थॉट्स दिए। Exactly, authenticity, humility, I agree with you. Profundity होनी चाहिए। ठीक है, thank you.
I guess we've come close to the end of today's event. May now kindly request our Ambassador to kindly share a few words and present a token of appreciation. Can we have once again a huge round of applause for Namita Gokhale who gave us her time, and thank you so much, ma'am. Ambassador.
We are very delighted to have Namita here in Kathmandu, especially from the Indian Embassy side. I think this is the first time you've been invited by the Indian Embassy and BP Gorilla Foundation. Of course, you have your own South Asian deep literary network, and through that network, you had come earlier. But we are very happy to have you here. What I really liked about your talk was, it was a flow. We did not realize how 50 minutes passed by. Very happy to see Narayan here. I thought you were still in US. And very happy to see there are many writers here, many aspiring writers here. And I think they are all inspired by what you have done in South Asia. I mean, the bold line, the capital line would be, the headline would be, those 70 literary festivals which are happening because Jaipur Literary Festival was started in 2005. And that's the singular great achievement for South Asia, for the whole region. And we must, compliment with clapping to one lady who has, of course there's a team, but one person who has made us all very proud, South Asians very proud. I think you discussed of course about translations, but what they did not get to know that you are also working in the field of translations. As far as I know, Namita ji is also working on translating translations from several Indian languages to English and vice versa. And that's, I think, in South Asia, what we really need is very strong and quality translation, and that will transform the literary scene in this region. And she has been also working, I think if you could share about that a little bit. What are you doing in translations online?
Well, actually the government asked me to set up something called Indian Literature Abroad, but it got a few roadblocks. But in the meanwhile, first so that will also open out soon. But in 2006, I could persuade Penguin Books India to publish in Hindi, Urdu and Marathi, which no multinational had ever done before. They had not even published in Spanish or German. Then we are at the moment translating Amish Tripathi's books into Hindi and doing it. But wherever, and I've had many seminars on translation, and I would urge that we have a workshop and seminar on translation in Nepal. I think it would be really useful. And I'm very much a part of the translating community, because I think we have so much great writing, and because there's a democratization of publishing, everybody can self-publish and go on the internet, but translation needs hard work. And I urge translation is the real story. I agree.
So that community of translators, will transform the literary scene. It will take the South Asian literature even deeper, and Namita ji is playing a great role in that. So thank you so much once again, and all the good luck to you with your writings in Nepali, in Maithili, in Bhojpuri, in Awadhi. Nepal is blessed with all these languages.
And in English also.
And of course in English also. So good luck. Thank you so much.
an interested audience. It feels very gratifying to have people who are listening to one.
Thank you so much, everyone. As always, program को video you can watch it tomorrow on our Facebook page, Embassy of India Kathmandu _. We have our official Facebook page. We also have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/EOIKTMNP. You will also get to avail this video of today's event in our YouTube channel by tomorrow afternoon. Thank you so much for being with us today. Please join us for refreshments before you leave.
Thank you. So send me the link.